All right, we are back live for our Wednesday edition of Seminole Sidelines, and I am joined by Osceola recruiting analyst Charles Fishbein. My name is Pat Burnham. I'm a football writer and football analyst, recruiting analyst for the Osceola, part of the Florida State Rivals Network for Florida State. Obviously, Fish, this is traditionally one of the most exciting days on the college football calendar, but with the advent of the early signing period, obviously a slow day, at least on Florida State's front, as they add the addition of one more player to the class of 2023, at least through the scholarship process, and that is linebacker Dylan Brown Turner from Dallas, Texas, South Cliff Oak High School, I believe. Listen, kind of first of all, what's it like to kind of have a slow news day on the first Wednesday in February for you?
It's kind of sad. This day used to be a great day as far as just the anticipation, not knowing. I always remember even going back to the Bobby years because Bobby would hold out, that close, strong mentality of, finishing signing day up with about 7 or 8 kids that were highly rated. And it just, there was so much suspense that went into it. And now it's kind of anticlimactic because they do it early. And really now it's just 1 or 2 kids. And even nationally, the excitement's not there. I always remembered watching those shows on ESPN, whether it was at 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, seeing guys commit to the schools, whether it was Florida State, Miami, whether it was Oregon. That was always great. So I really think they need to go back to that. I think there's a good chance that it does happen. We've discussed it that the commissioner of the SEC, I think, wants to go back to that route. And, it's still always fun because we could talk, football, 365 days a year.
Yeah.
And it never gets old. But, it's still always exciting. There's always 1 or 2 kids extra out there, and we're going to discuss some of them. But this is more of just finalizing what you've done for the class and see where you sit, and then you can reevaluate and see if you need more guys after spring with the transfer portal.
Yeah, we'll get into a little bit of that too, but certainly right now, Florida State, as of 12:33, has signed linebacker Dylan Brown Turner, 6'2", 200 pounds, out of Dallas, Texas, South Oak Cliff High School. They have also taken the commitments of at least 2 2023 prospects, Michael Grant, who will be a preferred walk-on at Florida State, right here from Tallahassee, Florida, McClay High School, 6'4", 195. Interesting note, and I've tried to reach out to his mother, who I've known for a long, long time. His grandfather was on the first FSU football team. And then, of course, they've also added Grant Fielder, a defensive end prospect from Georgia. Watched his film. Very good walk-on prospect, a high motor. But, Fish, let's just get your thoughts, number one, on Dylan Brown Turner, what you think of him as a player, and then we'll talk about how that kind of completes this class of high school kids in its totality.
Yeah, I think, we both discussed him. I think with one, they have a need at linebacker, and with the new way that recruiting is, you could take 1-year projects, and if it doesn't work out, you could always, send them to the transfer portal or process them or whatever we call it these days. I don't have a problem with the take because they do need linebackers. They need bodies. You know how important these guys are on special teams. Linebackers, you still need them. Even though the game's changed and a lot of teams have gone to 5 and 6 DB type defenses, you still need these linebackers. The kid, I don't think he's a terrible take. I know there's people out there that act like this kid can't play at all. I do think he shows some ability to play, but this is the reality is he's a kid that was committed to North Texas. He was a Sun Belt kid. And North Texas, they have a really good linebacker there. That's an NFL prospect that they had on their team this year that they developed. So this is a developmental kid. The whole point, though, of the whole developmental side of it now with the transfer portal, are the FSU coaches going to be patient with a kid like this because he's going to need time. This isn't a guy that's a plug and play. He's nowhere close to a Blake Nicholson, who we both like. He's a guy that is going to need 2 years to really get into the weight room, learn the game a little better. You can tell on film I don't think it's an instinctual thing. I think it's more that there's sometimes he gets lost on film and what he's supposed to do. And a lot of that can be taught. Do I think he's a big-time prospect? No, but with the way they need bodies at linebacker, you have one or two injuries at that position next year. This kid may see the field at least on special teams because of how important those guys are. So I don't have a problem with the take. Like I said, he does show some ability. Is he a high ceiling kid? No, but you can never have enough linebackers. They have a need at that position. They had one or two extra scholarships to use. Worst case scenario, the kid doesn't work out and he ends up in the portal next year and they take that spot and use it on someone else.
Yeah, and you're right. They had to have numbers there. They'll have 7 linebackers on scholarship going into the spring. So this will get them to, well, that I believe that includes DeMarco Ward. But listen, they needed bodies at that position, and they need some guys that can come in here and back up. And right now, listen, these guys will be afforded the opportunity to play because of the depth there. But as you said, right now, the guy looks most likely to be able to come in and play right now as a true freshman is Blake Nicholson. To that end, Fish, you and I were both anticipated that Florida State would take an additional linebacker in this class. We both thought it might be a portal guy. How do you see this playing out towards the spring? We still have one more transfer portal period to go through. Listen, there's going to be some really good football players that get beat out at their respective schools this spring. Do you see Florida State dipping its toe back in the portal water at the end of spring at the linebacker position?
Yeah, I could see that. I could see them stepping in if they could get, you could always use an extra pass rusher, maybe an offensive tackle. You don't know, like spring football, the whole thing of spring football is you want to get to see these guys. You also want to come out of spring football without any major injuries. Knock on wood, you don't want to have those issues. But now the portal gives you the opportunity, if you do have a season-ending injury, that you could basically replace a kid. So that's always important. And there's going to be guys that feel they should be starting at FSU, and everything's happy right now, but you know how it works. These guys get beat out, and all of a sudden, it's not great to be a team player anymore and sit behind somebody else. And then how people on the outside are talking into a guy's ear, hey, you could start at this other school, just enter the portal. So I don't think the process is done either way. I think there's going to be guys after spring football that decide, you know what, Florida State, I'm not going to get to really play here. I'm going to go in the portal. And then there's going to be guys at other schools that are going to go, hey, listen, I have a chance to play for an ACC championship, potentially a playoff spot. Let me go to Florida State. So it works both ways. That's how the portal is now. They give it, then they take it away. So
yeah, and listen, like you said, there will be activity as soon as spring ball wraps up around the country, and that shortened 15-day window, which I'm going to be glad the second one is short. That 45-day transfer portal window was big and created all kind of chaos, and I think we'll see more adjustments made to that. As I said, not only did they bring in Dylan Brown-Turner, but if you go to the Osceola.com or FloridaState.rivals.com website and go to our premium message recruiting board, we actually have an evaluation on 2023 defensive end prospect Grant Felder, who has announced that he will come to Florida State as a walk-on. We've got highlights of him playing. I think our FSU fans will be impressed by the quality of preferred walk-ons Florida State is getting. And again, they also took Michael Grant from Tallahassee McClay High School, a 6'4", 195-pound walk-on quarterback. His grandfather was actually on the first Florida State football team, so kind of some a neat connection there. And then, of course, I believe they've just announced the addition of another preferred walk-on, but we are live, so I can't get that information to you. But, Fish, this does take care of the class outside of going back into the portal in the spring. It does rank number 25 in the nation. That does not include the transfer portal guys, but just your thoughts on the high school guys that they signed. What position, at least from the high school perspective, do you think Florida State got better at?
Well, I mean, anytime you add a Hakeem Williams, we talked about this. This kid's a difference maker in all different ways. I mean, they don't have a guy. They have a guy in Johnny Wilson that has the size, but he doesn't have this kid's speed and the ability to take a short 5 or 6, 7 yard hitch route, make a defender miss and go the distance. he's a difference maker. He makes it very difficult on defensive backs. If you try to come up and press him, he can out physical you, get by you. He has the ability to stretch the field, score quickly on the field. If you go watch his highlight films, there's a play against Cardinal Gibbons where he outran the whole team and he had one shoe missing. So this kid's a special talent. I think he's an impact type player. Even though they're loaded at wide receiver, this is a guy that could come out in blowouts early in the season if they get some blowout wins where he could play early on. And he'll be a contributor at some point of this year. Overall, I thought the class was very balanced. We talked about this. When you add in the portal kids, they pretty much hit on every need. You needed a quarterback. They got a quarterback in Brock Glenn. They needed running backs. They got running backs. They needed wide receivers. They got Hakeem and Vinjarius Jacobs. Goldie Lawrence is another kid. He's more of a developmental kid with the size. You look at the offensive line, getting Lucas Simmons, and then they brought in portal kids on the O-line with Jeremiah Byers and some of the other guys that they brought in. Defensive line, they hit on those needs. So it seems like pretty much everywhere from quarterback to DB, they got players. I think balance in these recruiting classes is huge. I'm not a big fan of these classes where you have one linebacker 1 year and 5 the next. That's why it was important they brought in this kid that was committed to North Texas. It balances that class out. You now have multiple guys, and the reality is the more guys you sign at a position, the more likely you're going to hit on a kid. It's just a numbers game in recruiting a lot of times, and you never want to leave yourself with an unbalanced class.
Yeah, from a high school perspective, I agree with you. I thought they hit home runs at wide receiver. Then, of course, where I really thought they did good on the high school side of things was at defensive back. I'm really excited to see what Jabril Rawls, Kenton Kirkland, Conrad Hussey, and then probably the guy I want to see more than anybody out of this class when it gets here is Quindarius Jones. I don't know where Quindarius is going to end up. He's listed as an athlete. I think he'll be a defensive back. He played wide receiver and DB in high school, and he could play both. But a phenomenal athlete and a guy that I don't think gets talked about enough. And then, of course, you mentioned it before. Listen, Jerry Cutts, our publisher, wrote an article that basically calling Mike Norvell the king of the transfer portal. And you look at what they did via the transfer portal on both sides of the ball, really. But they solidify the offensive line with Roddick, Jones, and Byers. I think Roddick and Byers are day one starters. I think Keandre Jones is going to have an opportunity to compete at guard to take one of those starting positions. And then, of course, on the defensive line, you've got Fintrell Cypress, a all-ACC caliber corner. Then Gilbert Edmonds, I think, is a guy that's going to make an instant impact at defensive end. And then you got Fisk and Jackson inside. So, listen, an exciting time. And you add those portal guys in, Fish, to the rankings. Where do you put Florida State's recruiting class? Is it a top 15 class? Is it a top 10 class when you talk about the portal?
Yeah, I think it's a top 15 to 20 class. There's not. We've talked about this. While they have Hakeem, they have a lot of very good players. How many of those next level players like Hakeem do they have? Those guys are difference makers. I don't think they have a ton of those guys, but they have guys that are in their class, like the kid from Mississippi, the defensive back Quindarius, that we both like. He's a versatile kid, and he's a very under-the-radar type prospect. You watch him. He plays the game how guys used to play the game, very physical. He tackles well. He tackles well in space. He's a guy that could go one-on-one with a receiver and not get lost. You even watch it in the NFL now, how poor guys are on the back end of tackling. This kid literally runs through guys, and I think it's a pleasure to watch when you're watching it on film because he has that ability to do those things that a lot of guys don't want to do anymore. A lot of guys shy away from contact. He's not one of them. We've talked to Jabril Rawls on a podcast. He seems like a great kid. One thing is you look at these kids, they all have that same character traits. They're very good kids. They seem like team players, guys. Even when they're not elite kids, they're guys that you feel like they'll put in the time and the work and to get better. And a lot of times you've seen it at Florida State at Cameron Irving that they had in the past. So it wasn't a highly rated kid that ended up a first-round pick. If you have that the talent part and you're willing to work hard and put in the time and you're coachable, that's very important because a lot of these guys are not developed. And fans think that every one of these guys is going to be an all-star. Most of them are developmental prospects when you're recruiting them. There's very few elite guys, and that's why the top schools in the program go after those guys, because there's so few of them. Most of these guys are going to be guys that you have to bring in. You have to get them in that weight room. They most likely are not going to play a whole lot their freshman year. And what happens is guys that don't play their freshman year, the fans forget about them, or they call them busts because they don't make a play their freshman year. It's kind of unfair because majority of these guys are not going to play early. You want to have the physical traits that you could develop down the road, that these guys are going to end up possibly not only all conference players, but guys that have a shot to play at the next level once they're done with college.
Yeah, let's just go ahead and kind of move towards the spring. And, obviously, hopefully everyone gets through healthy. But if you're going to attack the portal again in the spring, Fish, what is the one position that you would want Florida State to help kind of build depth or bring in more talent at?
I think safety spot, they lost a lot with Jamie Robinson being it wasn't just a physical side and the talent side. It's that leadership role. Who's going to step in? Akeem's had his moments. We know he's a very good football player. Is he a leader? Can he lead that unit, that safety unit, to produce at the level that those safeties produced at last year? Some of that needs to be figured out. They've got talent there. We've thought that, the defensive backfield has been one of the more talented spots, but it's kind of been a disappointment. Those guys haven't played at the level they're supposed to. Travis Jay, even Akeem Dent, these guys, will they get to that next level and produce at the same level as Jamie Robinson? If not, maybe they go to the portal and find a kid that's on another team that's looking for a chance to play for a championship.
Yeah, I agree. Now, I would differ. I want a linebacker. I want an experienced linebacker on the roster. So a guy that can come in at least get you 15 to 20 snaps a game and you don't lose anything.
A lot of those guys don't enter the portal, though. For some reason, linebacker is one of the spots that you don't see a ton of quality there,
Yeah. Well, listen, it does not end. Recruiting never ends. And, of course, there have been 3 junior days in a row that Mike Norvell and the staff have hosted on the last 3 Saturdays, and they've gone very well. We saw 4 offers come out of this last junior day. And, of course, they've been going offensive and defensive line heavy. They offered Miami offensive tackle Rainer Andrews, a guard out of Georgia, Caleb Holmes, a defensive tackle, offensive lineman, Nazir Johnson out of Dublin, Georgia. He's a really raw prospect. And then, of course, Romanus Frederic was also offered this past Saturday or Sunday. Just talk a little bit. You're down there where Rainer Andrews is. We both watched film on him. Kind of give me your thoughts on what you think of him as a prospect.
Yeah, I got to watch the first 3 of those kids on that list. Raynard Andrews, he's kind of like a Lloyd Willis, Rod Orr type prospect. He's a developmental kid. You watch it on film. He is a big, long, athletic kid. He can move, but he's very raw. He's, hasn't had a ton of snaps. I watched him at Miami Jackson last year, and he stands out physically. He does stand out physically, and the physical traits are there, being able to move laterally. He is a tackle, but this is a guy that if you do take, he's a 2 or 3 year project. And once again, is this kid going to be patient? Rod Orr and Lloyd Willis went through the process. Both of them had talent. I know a lot of people are probably, they're busts. Florida State probably developed those guys to be starters at the 2 schools that they're going to go to. And that's half the battle you deal with a guy like this. Is this kid and your program going to be patient enough to watch this kid develop and eventually start down the road? He's not a guy that's going to come in and start. He's not as far along as even a Daughtry Richardson, who we really liked last year. That was a project, but is further along. Is this kid going to get down the road to the point that if you do take him, that he can start here, or are you just developing him for another program? Watching some of the other kids, Caleb Holmes, I really liked his film. I don't know what you thought of him. I do like the fact this kid, he gets on guys, he moves bodies, he initiates contact. You watch him on film, he does the things that you want to see out of Raynard Andrews. This is a Coach Atkins type lineman. I've watched the guys. There's kind of a trend with him. He likes those big body kids that can add weight. They have the big base, they got the big bottoms, and they can get up to 300 pounds. But the one thing you notice is the kid moves really well, has a bit of a nasty streak, gets on a defender and can pound them in the turf. And then you look at the Nazir Johnson kid. This is what we're talking about. Florida State needed to get bigger inside at the D tackle position. When you look at this kid, he looks like a grown man. They need guys that already are big, that when they get here, all you're really doing is remolding that clay. You don't want to take a 250, 260-pound guy, because once again, those guys are going to take 2 years to develop in the weight program. This is a kid that's already physically there, and all you're doing is remolding him. And hopefully by year 2, this is a guy that could be in the rotation, take some snaps, and eventually down the road become a starter.
Yeah, and I'll work my way backwards. I'll start with Nazir Johnson. Obviously, he is, as you said it, I mean, he is a raw piece of clay. He's very undeveloped as a football player, but you can go and watch. He's athletic. He's big. He can move. He's got, if you go to his Twitter account, he's got a where he's doing backflip after backflip after backflip, which is his size and weight shows you his athleticism and explosiveness. But if you watch his film, he does have a way to go as a football player, but certainly you understand the attraction and why Nazir Johnson was offered by Florida State. Caleb Holmes, I agree with you. Out of the 3 big guys, he is the most accomplished as a football player. He and Andrews both play with a mean streak. They play through the whistle. They throw people on the ground. Obviously, Caleb transitions to college. He's as a guard center type guy, but very physical, plays with great leverage, explosive, and really does a good job of driving his feet through contact and staying locked on to defenders. And then, of course, as you said, Raynar Andrews is a big-bodied tackle prospect. Listen, I've watched some other guys that they've recruited. There's some guys I still think have offers coming at the offensive line, but certainly he's got some ability. He does a good job in pass protection. You don't see him run block a lot on his highlight tape. I'd like to see a little bit more of that, but certainly you understand that there's probably a guy they want to see develop over the course of his senior season. I like, but I'm really a big fan of Holmes. I thought that was the best of those 3 big offers to the big guys. Listen, they have done a great job of bringing these kids on campus these last 3 weeks. We've seen a number of big-time prospects on campus, including tight end Walter Jones, who is one of the top-rated, I think, number 9 rated tight end prospect in 2024. He said after his visit that, at Florida State's standing with him had increased. He's had really good conversations with Mike Norvell and with tight end coach Chris Thompson. In fact, he told the Osceola that, hey, listen, Chris Thompson is one of the reasons my intrigue with Florida State has increased. But he's one of a lot of national kids that have been on campus or national recruits. They had Nye Carr, the University of Georgia wide receiver, commit on campus. Just talk a little bit about the ability for Florida State to get these high-profile kids. We also saw Peyton Joseph, a nationally ranked kid, for 2025 on campus. Jared Smith, the 5th-rated overall prospect in 2025, was on campus this past weekend. Alvin Henderson, the number 24 overall prospect in 2025, a running back, was also on campus. Just talk about the ability to get those kind of guys on campus, and is that something they were able to do last year at Fish?
No, I think the one thing, and I've talked to a few college coaches about this, the one way to land these kids is you have to get them on multiple visits before this summer, getting them on for junior days. I think BJ Gibson's been on campus somewhere like 5 times. I really like BJ Gibson. The athletes, the guys that can play multiple positions, once again, can play running back, can play wide receiver, maybe play DB. Very good athlete. You watch him, he blows by guys. This Walter Matthews kid, the tight end, Florida State doesn't have one of these on the roster right now. It's no knock. Most teams don't. I think Georgia's one of the few that has, these big guys, 6'6". When you're talking guys that can line up a wide receiver and dominate a small defensive back, or you put a linebacker on him, he's a mismatch. And can you just imagine Florida State having a kid like this with the run game, with their other wide receivers. How do you defend somebody like this? He gives you so many options, and that a guy like that could change everything. So hopefully the two guys they brought in the portal will make Florida State attractive. Norvell had a lot of success with tight ends at Memphis, not as much at Florida State. It's been, it's one of those positions that they've been unlucky a little bit where guys aren't as good. But if you could land someone like this is a difference maker. We talked about it. It's Florida State. Norvell got this program to 9 wins in the regular season, 10 in the bowl game. That's the easier part of the equation. Getting to 11, 12 wins, winning championships, conference championships, and national titles. Walter Matthews types, those are the guys that are going to get you to that next level. You got one in a team. You have to continue to build that. And the more of those guys you have, and the Georgias of the world have those 5 or 6 or 7 difference makers, you can match up with those teams, with your 22. But it's those 4 or 5 guys that are difference makers that win you games when it matters most. This is one of them. They've got some other guys that came in, like you said, the Peyton Joseph kid. Nykar is a wide receiver. He's another difference maker receiver that Florida State.
Hey, Fish, before we move on to the other guys, just to bring a bow on Matthews, he said his quote was, "I've got to think about it, but top 7, top 5, but they're on the rise right now for me," is what he said after his visit. And so, he said that the visit with Coach Thompson meant a lot to him. He loves the way Mike Norvell gets the ball into the tight end's hands. And then we asked him, now they got a lot of work to do, right? They're improving, but we asked him who else is he considering, and he said Ohio State, Southern Cal, and Michigan. But they have improved their stock with Matthews a bunch after this trip. So, but yeah, and going back to Carr, I do want to ask you about Carr. He came in, he is committed to Georgia. But he said after his visit that that he was open. He wants to find out. Now, he did not decommit. How do you read the tea leaves on that?
Yeah, you know how this is. Recruiting's a marathon, and sometimes you get lucky in recruiting that you catch a kid's attention, and you just happen to be the better fit for that kid. Yes, he's committed to Georgia. Georgia's won 2 national titles. We know all the pluses, but sometimes some kids want to blaze their own trail. And Florida State, they've shown a lot at the wide receiver position last year. That was a much improved room, but there's still a lot of improvement you could get at that position. It's not like Florida State has the top receivers in the country. They got a good group, but when you add a kid like a Nykar or you add a kid like a Hakeem Williams and continue to add these parts, that gets you over the top. And I just think Colquitt County's not that far. I don't believe from Tallahassee.
No,
I think so maybe it's closer to home than even a UGA. I think it's one of those schools that is actually closer to Tallahassee than to Athens. You never know. The kid may just feel more comfortable, and you steal a kid like this. It's happened before, whether it's a Telvin Smith or some of those guys like Greg Reed or those Southern Georgia kids. Sometimes you get lucky in this this recruiting world, and this may be one of those kids.
Yeah, listen, I was a little bit surprised that he said it was open. He's still looking for a home, and of course, Georgia's back-to-back there'll be some work there. Another kid down in your neck of the Nate, Miami Central wide receiver LaWayne McCoy was on campus as well. It was his 5th visit. His stock is growing as a prospect, but just a little bit about your thoughts on LaWayne McCoy and where he stands on Florida State's list.
Yeah, I mean, Miami Central is a school that's been very kind to Florida State over the last decade. Here's a kid that he's kind of coming into his own. I think he's one of those late developing type kids. Can play another guy that's can play both sides of the ball, a good athlete. The theme with these guys, we continue to say, they're not pigeonholing themselves, these coaches, in that these guys play multiple positions. So they're good athletes. They've had so much talent at Central that these type of kids fly under the radar a little bit. He's a prospect, I think, where they sit at receiver or whether he plays DB. He's one of those guys that they can continue to recruit, be patient with, see him during the spring, get him on campus this summer. He's not going to be somebody that just commits right away. So they're going to have the ability to scout and recruit him. He continues to get better every time I see him. I think he's a good prospect. I don't know if he's a take right now where they sit at those positions, but he is a guy that will be on the radar and they potentially could take down the road.
Yeah, listen, they do have already 2 receivers committed for the class. You wonder how many they'll take. Probably maybe one more, maybe 2. We'll see. They took 4 this year, and obviously you're going to see a lot of 3 and 4 receiver sets with Mike's offense. Of course, they have a plethora of tight ends now, so that'll be interesting as well. Fish, they also had a couple of high-profile 2025 kids. Peyton Joseph from Peach County, Georgia, was on campus. He was very impressed, walked away very impressed with Mike Norvell and Alex Atkins. In fact, said he did not have an order right now in his recruiting process or a list of schools that he was high on, but but then he turned around and said, but if he did, Florida State would be number 1. Then we saw, Jared Smith, the the 5th ranked player, overall player in 2025 for Birmingham, Alabama. He essentially said the same thing, that he was literally blown away by the music in the stadium on his visit. But certainly that it was important to him to get down here this early in his recruiting process, because he wanted to see if he liked what Mike Norvell has done with the program, and that they were moving in the right direction, and that they were changing the face of the program, and he wanted to see if he could be a part of that change. So again, a guy that is going to be back for the spring game, says he is not going to camp at Florida State, but will be back during the summertime as well. Then you had Alvin Henderson, a running back from Elba, Alabama, who was on campus, and he is the number 24 rated prospect overall in 2025. Just talk a little bit about the importance of getting these 25 kids on campus at this point.
You see with Joseph, some of the offers he has from Alabama to Georgia. This is going to be a battle. O-linemen, offensive tackles. They don't grow. The really good ones don't grow on trees. There are a select few. It's good that they had positive words. Coach Atkins has been here before. Eventually, you're going to win one of these battles. I've always said you can't worry about the ones you lose. They had a Marius Mims that they were close to getting not only once but twice. Eventually, I feel like Atkins will roll the dice, and one of these kids will go his way. This may be one of them. The kids from Alabama, I'm always going to be a little skeptical on those kids, because you saw with Falk this year, it's tough to pull those Alabama kids. A kid's from Birmingham, Alabama, the defensive end, he looks like a freak, but let's be honest, they usually sing Home Sweet Alabama then. I don't know. It's hard to compete with governors and stuff. So, God bless them. Keep recruiting them, and hopefully one of them just signs on signing day, but I'm not going to hold my breath on those.
Yeah, I believe Alvin Henderson has like 56 scholarship offers. It's crazy. But listen, he's from South Alabama. Maybe that helps. He's from Elba. He's not as close to Tuscaloosa or Auburn as Jared is. Jared's right there in Birmingham. So I'm sure if Alabama comes back, that could be difficult. But he does not have an Alabama offer right now, despite being the 5th rated player overall in the 2024 class. But yeah, listen, whatever Mike and his staff, we get to see a little bit of it while we're out there, because they do start off in the IPF on junior day. But really, the response from all the kids, we haven't even talked about 24 safety prospect Ricardo Jones, who he had a great time. Really liked his time with Patrick Surtain. He's a 4-star kid that's got offers from just about everybody. So whatever they're doing inside those meetings, whether it's individual meetings, whether it's position meetings as coaches, where they're meeting with the entire group, and of course the parents, that come with the kids, whatever they're talking to these kids about, they are certainly getting positive responses to it. And so it was, listen, you can see the change, and we're talking about this being a non-traditional day. We're talking more about 2024 kids and 2025 kids than we are 2023 kids. But always a fun day. And they've had guys. Bob just texted they are done with player interviews. This is how the times have changed, Fish. They have guys that are on the roster doing interviews today on National Signing Day with the press. So it certainly has changed. And then, of course, Fish, to close it out, I know that you and I have not had a chance to talk about it yet, and there's probably some other things we can talk about. But let's just talk a little bit. The schedule came out. You got LSU open up the season in Orlando, a home game against Southern Miss. Then you're at Boston College, at Clemson before a bye. Then you have Virginia Tech, Syracuse, and Duke on a 3-game homestand before going to Wake and Pitt, and then welcoming the Hurricanes in a rare November game. There's been a couple of them. Then you got North Alabama. Then you're at Florida. Anything stand out to you about the schedule? I know you have a tendency to make a lot of the schedules early, and these rosters will change between now and the spring, at the end of spring, beginning of the summer. But what stands out to you about the schedule?
Yeah, I mean, usually Clemson's usually in mid-October, having those 2 games, the LSU game and the Clemson game, in that first month. The one thing is those games are very physical and emotional. You want to make sure, even if when you win, you don't lose, meaning that you come out of those games and you're not just physically beat up, because that happens. You know how that is. I mean, when you play an LSU, you see an SEC team, you need a week to recover. That's why it's good to have a game like a Southern Miss after that, is because you need time to recover. And then in week 4, you got Clemson. So you just want to make sure, if this is a team that's going to play for the ACC title, that they come out of those 2 games relatively healthy. And then if you come out of that, even if you split, worst case scenario, you split, you end up 1-1 and you still are 3-1, your goals are still in place. They showed last year they made a nice run at the end of the year. It's not how you start, it's how you finish. They finished strong. So the schedule will set up nicely. You just don't want to come out of those 2 games too beat up, that it not only beats you once, but it beats you down the road and beat you multiple times if you don't come out of those games healthy. So that's the only thing I saw. I mean, it gives them a great opportunity. You win those 2 games, and you're in the discussion for not only the playoffs, but there's postseasons awards for certain players that they're going to have a shot at. So it gives you a chance. Hey, if Florida State's really back, go out and win those games and make everybody take notice.
That was one of the things I said. Some people love the schedule, some people hate it. And listen, if Florida State is the 10-win team, 11-win team, a lot of people think they're going to be next year. Then where these games fall really doesn't matter. And I want to go see what the roster turnover has been at each of these schools before I put a ranking on which school was the hardest, the easiest game to the hardest game. A couple things do stand out to me. You do get to go to Boston in September, which is probably a lot better than November, even late October. You don't get the bye before Clemson, but you get to go to Clemson. You have to go to Clemson after Boston College. Listen, I don't know if that means anything. If I had to get at face value, with the loss of the quarterback at Boston College and coming off a bad seat, they've lost some key players, lost a safety, I believe, to another program. They don't seem to be at face value what they were last year, and certainly not the year before that. But I do think you're drawing Clemson at a good time. They have a lot of people to replace. Of course, a lot of people think they're just going to reload instead of rebuild. But you have a quarterback that'll be starting about his 6th college game ever in Klubnik. Then you get the bye. I don't think anybody knows what to think about Virginia Tech right now. They're kind of in a rebuild mode. This is not the normal Duke team that we see. They've done a great job there with Elko, but and then of course you got Pitt on November 4th. I wish they'd quit bringing in teams from North Alabama. This is literally North Alabama, but let's stay away from the Division I AA and Division II teams in the state of Alabama. But listen, you got Miami at home. Then you got North Alabama. Then you get to go to Florida. So, hey, listen, I don't see anything really as far as really tough. Nothing to me. I don't think they had the same tough stretch in the middle of the year that they had last year with Wake Forest, NC State, and Clemson back to back to back. I don't see that. So I think the schedule holds up pretty well for them. Obviously, you got a concern. You go play which will be probably the most hyped game in opening weekend, which will be Florida State versus LSU. You got a quick turnaround. You play on a Sunday night, come back and play Southern Miss on a Saturday. But listen, that's part of the deal. But anyway, I kind of like the way the schedule sets up. Like I said, I kind of want to dig into who's coming back, who's lost who's added who, to get a better understanding of where these programs are. But just at face value, I think it's a very favorable schedule for FSU.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing you learned last year, we freaked out a little bit. I was like, man, this is a tough schedule. You just don't know where these teams are. Injuries happen. Schedules are always like, what do you call it? Like moving. It's like a moving part. You just don't know. Like Boston College last year, you're like, they got a Boston College team, and they ended up blowing them out. You just don't know what these teams are year to year. So much changes, especially with the portal. We don't know what you go into the Clemson game and Clemson loses a couple guys on their own line. Yep. All of a sudden, their quarterback's under pressure, gets beat up. You don't know. They don't really have a backup really to replace them, so you don't know what could happen. It's like that now in college football. So it's great to discuss this about these schedules. But listen, last year we're like, I thought, all right, if they get to 8-4, what a great season, and they ended up outperforming that. I thought 8-4 was the ceiling. They ended up going 9-3 and getting 10 wins. I didn't think that was possible, and they did that because the schedule set up what looked difficult early on became. Who would have predicted that Miami would have been? I don't care what anybody says, blowing them out the way they did 45-3 or whatever it was, and then Florida being what they were. We could have speculated that they weren't going to be great, but they were still. They weren't the same Florida that you're used to seeing year in and year out. And then some of the teams at the back end of the schedule last year just weren't the teams that you thought they'd be before the season. So you just never know where this is going to go. You've seen it before. I mean, heck, you go all the way back to the year Dan Kendrick got hurt in a spring game. You just don't know what's going to happen. Football is a weird sport. Injuries happen. The ball bounces in certain ways, doesn't go your way, and all of a sudden, a season that you thought was going to be 10-2 or 11-1 becomes an 8-4 season. So we really got to see these teams on the field first before we, one or two games to really know what we're going to get out of this schedule. But it does give FSU has a great chance with this schedule to listen. You beat LSU and you beat Clemson, you're in the top 5. Yep. And maybe top 2 or 3 within the first month of the season, and you can't ask for much more than that.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Fish. There are surprises, good and bad, every year in every conference, and we saw it last year. Obviously, you and I both thought Florida State was about an 8-win team. They got 9, they got 10 in the bowl, so I think that to me, they were one of the surprise teams in a good way. Then you had a couple of teams that we thought we were going to see more from, like a Boston College, and maybe even a North Carolina went to the championship game, but their defense was awful. They really didn't have a chance to compete for the championship. But anyway, you saw some surprises. Listen, it's going to be interesting. I don't think they draw NC State this year, which is probably a good thing. I think they're going to be pretty good. So we'll see how it all plays out. Now, Fish, there are a couple. You and I follow college football, just not Florida State. So we're going to get into a little more discussion just about some of the things that are going on in football. But the Jaden Rashada saga is over. Former Florida State offensive coordinator and new Arizona State head coach Kenny Dillingham has apparently got an NIL deal that Jaden Rashada approves of. The former Florida commit. Just your thoughts. Did you expect Jaden Rashada to end up at Arizona State when all this started?
No. And listen, I'm sure they had a lot of money to give. All right. I'm sure their NIL. What do you call these NIL companies or collectives? All right. Their collective only had to hand out the plate for one guy, not 25. So they got a lot. They have no money left to spend. So Jaden's going to be running for his life because they don't have any whole lot of it. Well, you remember that one picture, I think it once was, it may have been Florida State, where there was like 5 turnstiles for offensive linemen. I think that's going to be Jaden. He's going to get his money, but he's also going to take a beating. So I hope he enjoys that paycheck, because he's going to need a lot of massage envies. All right.
That was a big get for Kenny, I think.
Oh yeah, it's a big time get.
That's listen, that kid was wanted by a lot of people. Apparently, I've heard between $9 million and $13 million. I believe neither one, but from Florida. But
hey, he's making a lot more. He's making a lot more than you and I. So.
And I saw where another collective went out of business yesterday. Somebody reported that the TCU collective went out of business. So
what a shock!
I mean, this is going to be. These collectives are going to be fascinating to watch, and so is this NIL stuff. But it certainly brought another layer to our curiosity about recruiting. But and then of course, I guess we'll wrap it up on this one. The greatest quarterback of all time, Fish, retired this morning. What do you think about Tom? Listen, I think he's the greatest quarterback. I always said when Tom Brady's teams were down by 7 or 10 points, it was always more fun to watch him when they were trailing. And the greatest quarterback I've ever seen. Or do you think he picked the right time to retire? I know I do. I didn't want to see him come back for another year on a new team. I was glad to see him retire while he still had some talent in the tank.
Yeah, what's crazy is the only real good spot for him was going back to the Bucs. The people talking about him going to the Raiders, I would not go to the AFC if I'm a quarterback right now. The best quarterbacks are in the AFC. Are you going to beat Mahomes, Allen, Burrow? Like, you got to beat some like pretty good dudes just to make it to the Super Bowl. I mean, like it didn't seem the right thing. And there was plays in that last game against Cowboys, especially on the interception. You saw him kind of turn his back. That's like the first time in his career I saw that. It was time for him to retire. I really didn't think he should have come back this year. He's gone through a lot off the field, and you want to see him go out in one piece. I mean, I still remember, watching Dan Marino at the end, or Troy Aikman, or these guys like Steve Young. They take a major blow from a concussion. You don't want to see him go out like that. He's had a great career. There's no reason for him to play anymore. And you know what? His legacy's set. He's got a lot of money waiting for him in broadcasting. He's got a big deal waiting for him. And you know what? He could go spend some time with his kids. There's better players now. The game has passed him by. Yes, he could still be successful, but I'm glad he's retiring. Yeah,
well, listen, I'm sure there are a lot of disappointed pro football fans in Miami, San Francisco, and Las Vegas, which were all the rumored to be where he was heading, despite the fact that at least two of those had kind of doubled down on their quarterbacks. I know that, obviously the kid at Miami, the head coach, had come back and said that, he's our guy, Tua. So anyway, it's kind of fascinating. So what do you think about the playoff game so far, or what do you think about the Super Bowl?
Man, Mahomes is just special. Everybody wants to just say it, count them out. And as long as he's on that field, he's one of the best quarterbacks. The Eagles, I hated the Eagles growing up being a Cowboy fan, but I have a ton of respect for Jalen Hurts. Here's a kid that in college never complained. He got benched for Tua, did his thing, ended up going to Oklahoma, having a very good career. So you do cheer for guys like this. You want a guy like Hurts to do well, even though I'm not a big Eagles fan. But congratulations to them. I do have a friend that's a coach on that staff, so I'm happy for Coach as well. So, either way, I'm a Cowboy fan, so I don't want to see the Eagles win. But if they do, Jalen Hurts, it'd be a great story. Here's a guy that nobody thought could really play in the NFL, got benched in college, and now he's in the Super Bowl. So good for him and that team. And I think it's going to be a very good Super Bowl.
Yeah, well, I do too. I was pulling for the 49ers and the Bengals. I'm a big fan of Burrow, and I just like the way the 49ers play. It's fun to watch them on offense. So I was a little bit disappointed by the outcome of the game. Obviously, once Purdy went out, the game was over. It was just, I remember saying, hey, it's just a matter of time before this game's over. Of course, listen, the Jalen Hurts story has been pretty fun to watch. Gets benched at Alabama, transfers to Oklahoma, I think wins the Heisman there, gets drafted in the mid-second round, and of course has proven all his doubters wrong. So he's kind of fun to watch. He's got a great story. Seems like a great kid. Now, where I was wrong, of course, I don't know how much you and I have talked about it, but I've been talking about it with some of my buddies. I never thought Sean Payton would end up in Denver, and it looks like about 15 minutes ago he has officially accepted the head coaching job for the Denver Broncos. Is he the guy to get Russell Wilson straightened out?
Listen, I didn't know a whole lot about Sean Payton other than you hear stuff, and I knew there was talk about him maybe one day being a Cowboy head coach. I listen to him every week on Colin Cowherd's show. I learn a lot. I mean, the guy's
a really bright guy.
He's very bright, and he understands stuff. Listen, the Broncos were the worst coach team I've ever seen in pro football last year. Like, I watched one game, his first game, Hackett. I said, this guy's fired. I would have fired him after week one. That's how bad he was. And I don't think the Broncos are that bad. They got talent. They got Jerry Jeudy on that team. They got a very good running back that came from North Carolina. Russell Wilson.
Yeah, now he missed most of the season too, so that'll help him when they get him back.
Yeah, so they got good tight ends. Their defense is very talented. I still think, other than the Chiefs, they could be a playoff team next year. The Raiders are a mess, and honestly, the Chargers, we keep hearing all about their potential, but every year they don't live up to that potential. So Denver could be a surprise team next year in the playoffs.
Well, that's where I wanted to see Peyton go, was the Chargers, because of that quarterback Herbert. And listen, the fact that Brandon Staley still has his job after the way he coached that second half. I know they went through the playoffs, and that's extremely, extremely hard to do. Just like going to a bowl game. I mean, it's very hard, probably harder than going to a bowl game, really. But I just thought only run the ball 7 times with a 20 or 27-point lead, which is crazy. I thought that's where Peyton would end up. Kind of surprised that he wants to take on this Russell Wilson project that's down there now, because Russell did not look like the same player. But anyway, always interesting. Football's always interesting, no matter if we're talking about college or pro.
No doubt. Well, he has 20 million reasons, I think, why he took the Denver Bronco job. So,
well, he got some of that Walmart money, I guess. I think that's who owns the Broncos these days, is the people that are associated with Walmart. But anyway, well, Fish, I know we've been on here a while. We usually try to make this show about an hour. Of course, kind of a slow news day on the recruiting front, with Florida State only signing one player to a scholarship this afternoon or this morning, and Dylan Brown Turner, the linebacker from South Oak Cliff High School in Dallas, Texas. We will be back on Friday. At least a version of this group will be back. I don't know whether Fish will be on, but certainly Bob Ferrante, Jerry Cutts, Kurt Weiler, or Ara Masudi will be back. I don't think I'll be on the show Friday, as hopefully recruiting is going to take a slow down. But anyway, Fish, I appreciate you always coming on here talking about these kids. No one knows them better than you, especially down there in South Florida, with most of these kids. A lot of these kids are getting offers from, but certainly a great recruiting class for Florida State, I think. Probably a little bit under the radar. And when you add those portal kids into that mix, man, it's a really strong class, and they took really address some immediate needs. Particularly, I think they have a chance to be a legitimate 2 deep on the offensive line for the first time in a long time, where there's not going to be much drop off from first to second team. We haven't even talked about some of the young kids that are developing on the offensive line. And then on the interior tackles, Fish, I think they could be 4 to 5 players deep between nose tackle and 3 techniques. So listen, we're only about a month and a half out from spring practice. It's already February 1st. They will start spring practice sometime around mid-March. And of course, they have the spring game on April 15th at 4 p.m. in Doak Campbell Stadium. Listen, please go to theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com. We have a lot of free content on there. We have some stuff behind the paywall, but we'd appreciate it if you guys would give us a look, give us a chance. We think we have a lot of great coverage on the Osceola. And of course, we also have the Osceola YouTube channel. Please check us out. We have interviews with a lot of the kids that were on campus last weekend for Junior Day. Thankfully, I was out there 3 days in a row. Thankfully, there's not a Junior Day today or this weekend. But listen, we'll be back on Friday. Hope you enjoy the show, and we will see you next time on Seminole Sidelines.